Hey, everybody, welcome to the Gym Life Podcast. Another great interview lined up for you here. This guy, of course, more recently spent the weekend at Clash on the Coast, where I got a chance to watch him perform down there. His resume is as long as my arm, so I'm not even going to try to recite his resume. Maybe he'll share some of his accolades with us, but without any further ado, welcome Tyler Young. Thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. I told you prior to the interview in a conversation that your name was always the name that was on the top of my list to get a hold of, to do an interview with, because your name, it's coast to coast almost. You've been in so many strongman competitions and performed well in most of them. I saw your resume. I think
Right.
podium is generally where you end up. You've got to know just about everybody from sea to shining sea in this sport. And your name resonates among everybody when they always would say to me, you got to get a hold of Tyler and get him on your show. So thanks again for joining me.
Absolutely, man. I'm happy to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about that resume and your backstory. I want to get that kind of out first and foremost. When did this all start for you, man? I mean, you've got a resume, again, probably 30 or 40 contests long, I'm guessing.
30, I think Clash was 37 for
Yeah.
me. So Strongman for me started, I'd actually joined the Marine Corps and I was looking for a way to be more combat effective. I was just a reservist, or it wasn't anything serious or anything like that. But CrossFit just wasn't my jam. I didn't think that it was, the right fit, but everybody in the Marine Corps was all about this high intensity, interval training. They had these little Connex boxes set up all over everywhere, so you could do CrossFit and stuff. And I was like, nah, that just ain't for me. So I was fortunate enough. I went to MP School at Fort Leonard Wood, and they had a little bit of a strongman gym there. And from there, I stumbled into starting strongman because I didn't even know that there was weight classes in the sport. I thought it was just, the giants that you watched on TV or something like that. From there, I got hooked up with a promoter that was actually pretty close to me in Bowling Green. And he was getting ready to host his first contest here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And, we got linked up and started training together, and that's just kind of how it took off. That would have been September of 15 is when I competed.
Okay.
So it would have been like my first or second show.
Yeah. And you kind of just took off running with it. I mean, by the looks of your resume, you're doing roughly about 5 to 6 shows a year for a good pace there for a while.
Well, to be honest, I kind of set the pace a little too heavy to begin because I loved it so much. I enjoyed it. I was given this analogy at Clash, the 5 or 6 minutes that I'm out there on the competitive field is the only time that I feel like my true self for the next 3 or 4 months if I've got to wait for another contest. So when I got started, I had to scratch that itch as much as I could. So there's if you go back to that post, there was like a 12-month period where I competed like 10 times.
Yeah.
I was just knocking them out. But fortunately, my mentor, if you will, Derek Stone, he's about an hour from me, an OG pro in Strongman Corp. But he pulled me aside at a contest. And he was like, hey, man, he said, do you want to participate at all these competitions or do you want to compete here? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're participating in a lot and you have the tools to be competitive, but you're kind of limiting yourself because you're competing so much. And I was like, okay.
Right.
So, that kind of flipped it on its head, how I approach training, how I approach competing, how I, approach finding contests that I wanted to go to and stuff like that. So, that was kind of really the turning point. And that might've been as late as like 2018 or 2019 that we had that discussion. So I just spent a couple of years, dicking around, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like a lot of guys, you love the sport, you love competition. That's why we do it. I mean, the idea that we're going to be great at it is always in the back of our mind, but at the same time, it's about finding those Saturday afternoons somewhere in a parking lot and throwing around weight with a bunch of guys you love to throw on weight with. And it does kind of steamroll into that sort of more of a hobby, less of an idea that you're going to keep getting better and better, because we both know you can't get better if you're doing 12 contests a year. You're going to not make the gains you need to. But yeah, it started off that way for you. So you started really, of course, you were, according to your resume, you were kind of podium. You were always in the competition. I didn't see a lot of 4th, 5th, 6th places coming from you. They all seem to be, first top 3.
Ironically, most of those 4th, 5th, and 6th places have come in the last couple of years, when I've kind of crested, if you will.
Yeah.
Because, I've been seeking out tougher competition and stuff like that. So, I ran the local circuit and, won. And finally, I was like, well, we got to step it up. I started at 90 kilos. I competed as low as 80 kilos. And then, at the time, there was OSG, and I had went over to India to compete at SCL 90 kilos, which internationally 90 is, a big class.
Yeah.
But here it was all about you're either a 105 or you're a heavyweight. That was the only class that they offered pro cards in, and that's what I wanted. So, I think my highest finish at OSG at 90 kilos was like 11th. Actually, I tied for 10th and lost a count back at OSG, kind of talking about earlier. But that was probably my highest finish at Worlds. And then ironically enough, I tied for 3rd in India and then lost a count back. So I ended up in 4th in India. So, but yeah, so wanted steeper competition, if you will. So no disrespect to 90 guys. I just wanted to come up. So
no, it makes sense. Listen, you chase that competition, and the 105 class is no secret to anybody. I don't think you're going to find tougher competition in that class. And if you're that kind of guy, if you're a 90 guy, that's you're thinking about it in the back of your head all the time. You're not too far away from it. And a lot of these 90s, as we mentioned one earlier, Nick O'Hare, even Nick Myers, arguably can compete with some of these guys right now.
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
yeah. DJ Pierce is another great 90. Aaron Blackford could compete with us. Michael Gonzalez competed with us last year at Clash. They're great. I got another 90 class.
Yeah, it speaks volumes for how big these classes are going to get and how we're going to see this crossover a lot taking place over the next couple of years, since Clash has kind of opened the doors now for 105s to be front and center on the scene of Strongman. So you started your 105 journey then probably 2 years ago, you said?
My first big 105 show, like I had done local ones, so I wouldn't have to cut to 200, even though I walked at like 206, 207.
Yeah.
My first big show would have been Nationals in 2020.
Okay.
Down in, I think it was in Alabama. And that was my first big 105 show. So
yeah. And how'd you do there?
Ended up in 19th.
Okay.
Did well across the board except for Husafell just shit the bed. Placed if I won the log, I was like top 5 on the deadlift, did decent on the yoke, did top 12, I think, on bag toss. And then I got like 67th on Husafell.
Oh yeah, take you right out of the game.
So it was kind of hard to keep perspective and battle back that second day, knowing that I'd already shit the bed, was out of podium contention. So
that's the tough thing about nationals, and I think a lot of guys, that's why a lot of guys kind of avoid nationals sometimes. It's not the fact they're running from competition. You just know, man, if you have one bad moment in that whole show, it's the difference between being top 10 or being bottom 50. It's really difficult.
For sure.
Yeah. So your 105 journey began. It's interesting, man. When I saw you at Clash, I know people always probably say this to you, Tyler. I always thought you'd be bigger.
Get that thought.
You definitely have the tenacity though, man. When I was watching you compete, and I remember watching that sandbag. Of course, that was one of the highlights of the show, that 4th sandbag that you picked up. That fucking thing was about as big as you were almost.
It felt like
crazy.
It.
I was only about 5 feet away from you as you started kind of coming forward to everybody with that sandbag, but you killed it, man. I mean, it was just a perfect example of I think just what you've been doing in the course of your career now in Strongman, where, don't judge a book by its cover. You've got so much power, and it's unique to me because, a lot of guys in that class that was surprising were much taller guys. They were actually bigger than I thought they were going to be, even in the 105 class. And I think a lot of them do a really good job of weight cutting and then going back into those shows even heavier. Where do you find your strengths at in the sport? And I know obviously your leverages are about a lot different than everybody else. You killed the squat, honestly. I felt you did at the show. I mean, talk about a little bit about what you're doing well and what you're getting better at.
Well, honestly, my biggest strength, if you will, is I'm just really stubborn. I joked with Isaac Mays at Clash, like I've got, I started lifting weights, pick this chip on my shoulder up, and I haven't picked it yet, so I'm just going to keep getting stronger. If somebody's stronger than me, that's one thing. I can go back to the gym, I can work on that. If somebody's faster than me, that's one thing. I can go back to the gym and I can, get faster, but they're not going to beat me just because I'm short. So I'll be stubborn as hell about that.
Yeah.
But, as far as, events that make me happy to see, heavy stuff, that kind of separates, a heavy log or a heavy axle clean and press. I was talking with Andrew Clayton about this a couple weeks ago, but between last year and this year, I tied for 5th last year in the finals, and then I did, I managed 8th this year, but I didn't zero anything all weekend.
No.
So that just, I may not be fast, but I'm there to be strong. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's kind of how I approach my training, if you will.
Yeah,
So
I love that about you, and I kind of gotten that through the time that the opportunity that I've had starting to follow you and follow your contest history and the way you compete in these contests. Yeah, the weight is something you embrace. Where a lot of guys, hey, listen, I know the strongman, the adage comes, if you're a strongman, you love heavy weight, but that's not necessarily true. That we know that's a fact that some guys buckle under the idea of having to push heavyweight. They search contests out according to kind of their more athleticism than staying away from the weight. But when you get to the level that you're at, there's just no choice there, and that's kind of in your wheelhouse.
Yep, exactly. And that, Nick Hamby was talking about this. He prefers it on the pro circuit as opposed to, the national circuit, because it's, 10 or 15 guys and you get to do different events, and usually they can be heavier or something like that than you might see at nationals.
Yeah.
And, nationals is all set to, funnel 250, 300 people through. So you may not get to do, the cooler events or something like that. But, that's kind of what separates Clash. We get to do the keg tosses and your finger fingers and all that, because it's a small collective group of guys. And I think that, him restructuring the pro, idea in the last couple of years is really going to give some other people the time to shine. Mike Congdon is a great example.
Yeah.
Not a pro. Bob Schwant's not a pro, but they're there competing for money just like everybody else. Getting to do those cool events, getting to shine, as opposed to having to carry a Husfeld stone and then getting 67th on it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it is true. I mean, you mentioned these guys that are that I guess would not be considered pros, but in my eyes and everybody else's eyes, when you compete at Clash, I don't care if you're in the qualifier, you make it to the final day. All those guys are pros in my eyes. They're at the top of their sport. So, that leads to the question, the biggest question, the elephant in the room, right? That's going around the strongman community right now. What does it really mean to be a pro? Because would you prefer to have an opportunity to make it an open qualifier for everybody all the time? Or how do you feel about that? Would you prefer to have a pro status, or would you prefer just to say, hey, if you're capable of getting the job done, get here and let's compete?
Well, and that's kind of a muddy question, especially
Yeah.
right now. I'll answer it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, do it.
The pro status is important, or at least some sort of qualification system like they did last year, because I went to ASM last year on an online qualifier to compete with pros. So, at least let some of those people, your Josh Isleys and stuff like that can absolutely compete with the rest of us. Or I said that really braggadociously, and that's not exactly, that can compete on the pro level. But I think that the distinction is important. I think that, it gives newer lifters something to stay motivated towards.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal to me. It may not be a big deal to the other guys that are complaining about their pro cards and stuff like that, but they can say what they want to. It has provided opportunity, at least for me anyway. So people ascribe a certain level of expectation to me and a certain level of respect, and I'm not saying that I necessarily deserve that, but there's a distinction, right? So I've paid my dues, I've put in my work, and I don't know. It means something to me. It may not to them, but
no. And I think if you asked anybody who found a way to get their pro status, because I think that's the bigger question, right? Is the pathways to actually get a pro status. But I would agree with you. The pro status to me is a badge of honor. It's something you've earned. It's something that you're right. I mean, I'll be braggadocious for you. You get to that level, you absolutely deserve all those accolades that go with it. And I think if we're going to separate this sport and try to make it sponsorship worthy and worthy with dollars, those people, those consumers and those advertisers like to see that pro status added to things as well. It separates what they're involved in. So I think you're right. It is a bit muddy. But I think there's got to be a path. There's got to be clear pathways though, right?
Right. And my problem with the system, if you will, is the bottleneck that we were talking about. At the top of the middleweight division, there are probably 15 amateurs just off the top of my head that could absolutely compete with us on a pro. I mean, they were there at Clash, competing, right alongside and beating the other pros.
Yeah.
So, but there's a big bottleneck at the division, and, they kind of have to wait for, a nationals to suit them, or maybe they get in an online qualifier. Josh Isley's another great example. He was in first by like 30 points in 2020, like going into the log, zeroed the log, and then still finished like top 10 or something crazy like that. Isley's incredible. But, this last year, the one where I got my pro card had 2 heavy overhead events. It was a max log and then
Yeah.
for reps. And he was like, well, there goes this year. You know what I mean? So it kind of
Yeah.
sucks. It's cyclical, right? So, somebody could show up and do really well on nationals because, there's a lot of moving events or there's a lot of throwing events because they're easy to set up. And, then they come to ASM where things are heavier and things are slower or whatever, or things are faster. I mean, or any number of things. And then they, just kind of fall off. So,
Yeah, there goes the opportunity. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
It's there needs to be. We overuse the word pathways all the time, but listen, there's no better way to put it. I mean, we need to figure out, ways that we can give more opportunity, not just to the top 3 at nationals. Because when you got a nationals class that's got 100 fucking guys in it, yeah,
For sure.
I mean, come on.
Strongman Court's credit, I think they're kind of getting in step because I think now, they're re-offering pro-ams and the highest place there does earn a pro card. So that's good. It's a step in the right direction as far as that goes, and gives them more of an opportunity than just national or winning the Arnold. But I was talking to Anthony about this. Obviously, he's a pretty close friend of mine. So we've talked from the beginning, and he was talking about, right after Clash last year, USS announced a pro division, and they increased the pay at OSG, and they increased the pay at ASM, and now they're offering the pro-ams and the regionals. And he kind of saw it as frustrating. He was like, well, they're doing this or whatever, and not to put words in his mouth, but they're doing this. And I was like, no, I was like, you've raised the tide for everyone. I was like, they're realizing that they have to get in step if they want to keep athletes, if they want good athletes to compete with them. And he was like, that's a good way to think about it. And I was like, well, you didn't even, I mean, you knew you were going to make a splash, but you didn't expect this kind of splash.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, you're right. I wasn't really prepared for, this kind of, positive fallout, if you will. So I think that, he ended up reaching out and partnering up with USS, and he's running ASM this year for Strongman Corporation. So I don't really know what all, the grand scheme is there, but it's nice to see everybody kind of working together,
Yes.
to kind of funnel the attention back on the athletes, because that's another thing that's cyclical, right? The more time and energy and money that you put in us, the better we're going to make you look, as a Strongman Corporation or as an organization, Strength League Collective. Fortunately for them, they had Camby to make them look extra good, and if they hadn't have fronted that money, and if they hadn't have taken all those risks to put us out there, then what?
Yeah, where would we be? Yeah, I love the collaboration, right? It's about time. I guess for a lot of us, that's what we say. It's about time. That's and it took Anthony's idea. Yeah, because we'd still be in the dark ages without Clash a year ago. Honest to God, we would. It's happening. And I talk to Anthony frequently as well. And he's a humble guy, but what he did is historic. It's going to change the course of strongman forever. And more people are going to get on board, and that's okay, because I think guys like you need to be showcased more in the sport, and you have to have other opportunities to compete and then just Clash, because Anthony can't do it on his own. There can't just be a bunch of 105 shows for Clash. There's got to be a lot of opportunities coming from all different directions. And if we're going to do that, then we need to grow that pool of athletes, qualified athletes.
Yeah.
And I do like the online qualifier. I get all that. Those are great. I love those. There's always a dark horse out there that we love seeing compete. Where'd this guy come from? But to get that pro status and to identify what that means is going to be a huge part of this collaboration moving forward. So yeah, I'm locking step with you the whole way.
And the biggest thing that you mentioned the online qualifiers. The biggest thing that I like about those is, if somebody's injured, like let's say, Richie Mochinkemba, if you will, if I pronounced his name correctly, had that shoulder injury in the finals at Clash, you know what I mean? So if he's unable to get healthy and unable to, hop in a 105 regional qualifier and maybe be 100%, an online qualifier opens the door for a lot of those athletes that might be a little banged up, that might be coming off a heavy contest that, kind of got broken. Still deserve to be there, because you need those gaps in time to prep for a big show. So I really like it from that aspect as well. It's a little bit more inclusive, or maybe we're expecting a kid at the end of the year. Maybe somebody has a kid and they're unable to do one of the regional qualifiers to get to national in the new Strongman Corporation model, if you will. So I'm a big fan of the online
Yeah,
qualifiers.
that's a great perspective, Tyler. I never really thought about that, but you're exactly right, because sometimes it's not about whether you want to compete or not, it's whether you can compete or not. So
For
when these
sure.
contests are made available, you're right.
Mhm.
We may still not be seeing the best guys participating where they need to be, because yeah, life gets in the way of this shit. Let's face it.
And somebody, they're making ends meet as it is anyway, and then you're expecting to spend five, six, $700 on a weekend trip to go compete at regionals for the opportunity, just to spend all that time and money. It's not really conducive necessarily to finding the best, in my opinion. It's just the people with the most time off or the most money, unfortunately.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that is true. And maybe that will probably never be 100% solved. But if you give it an opportunity to kind of fill in some of the voids, we can at least get as close as we possibly can.
for sure.
What about you? So Clash, I thought you did fantastic. I know you wanted to be at the podium, but I love watching you compete. I tell you what, I was more than impressed. Yeah, you just sticking it to him, man.
Yeah.
I just love seeing you compete, man, because I just thought to myself that tenacity is something, again, that you embraced, and not suggesting that anybody else there didn't, but I would fear to compete against a guy like you. If I knew you were there, I'd be, if I didn't bring my A game, man, I better just go home right now, because there's no
Yeah.
doubt, your reputation precedes you, and you brought it to Clash. So again, congratulations there. What is on the table for you now? I mean, what does a 105 guy do after Clash? I thought about this the other day. Clash is over. What do we do now?
Well, next potentially could be the Rainier Classic. I told Brian Terry, I think that's his name. I had told him that I had planned on coming out there, and hopefully I'm put together enough to make that. I'm going to make that decision for sure in the next week or so, because I'm still a little banged up.
Yeah.
But aside from that, with Anthony not re-inviting the finalists next year to Clash, last year we got an auto invite because we were fine.
Right. Yeah.
Which I understand why he's doing what he's doing. That's not like me complaining or anything. I don't have any problem trying to qualify again. But probably next for me will be Denver.
Okay.
Waco is a little too close to ASM for my liking, and then I'll do ASM the first week of October.
Okay. Yeah. So there's some things on the calendar. Yeah, I
Right.
don't mind that requalifying either. I think what it does from a consumer point of view is it keeps these athletes in the consumer's eye.
Yeah.
It makes us, embrace you guys more, because I get to see you again, and you're just not coming to one big show and doing one big show. You're going to get my attention one more time, maybe at least one more time. Yeah. So ASM, that's a big show. I mean, we know that if Anthony's going to be a part of that this year, that's going to get a bit more attention than it's gotten probably in recent years.
Right.
And boy, does it need it. Boy, does it need it. I think we can all agree ASM's gotten watered down over the years. Not knocking the competitors. I'm just saying, on the level of priority or hierarchy, ASM should be up high on that list.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Do it, kind of the way it needs to be done. He's hosting it in Nashville, so it's just right down the road from me, about an hour away.
Nice.
Pretty helpful, as far as, not that I have to cut weight or anything like that, but it's pretty helpful. But like last year, ASM, not to shit on Strongman Corporation, because I try to give their credit when their credit's due, but we had like a food bank in San Antonio.
Yeah.
September outside, and it ended up being cool enough under the the awning that we were under or whatever, but it just didn't really feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just being entitled, but it didn't really feel like it really showcased us. We had Tommy Sharp's family there cheering us on, and like 17 other people.
Yeah, no, it didn't. And listen, I'll be the one to beat that drum. When I hear of America's Strongest Man and I say ASM, and I see that in lights, I expect one of the biggest shows in the year, showcasing the strongest guys in the United States, period. And when we're getting the guys, I get that. But from a showcase standpoint, that show needs to be put in the spotlight, man, because that's the kind of show that you want to own that title. Everybody wants or should want that title. I'm America's Strongest Man. I mean, to go into that as a pro athlete and have that with your sponsors and shit, let alone that should be valuable. So no, I'm with you all the way. And again, I don't take sides either. USS, Strongman Corp, Anthony, I love them all. I want everybody to get together and have a great time doing this shit.
Yeah. All of the big four, Willie, Dion, Anthony, and Lynn Morehouse, they've all been great to me. I don't have anything, negative necessarily to say about them or other organizations. They just met me at different, points in my journey, if you will.
Yeah, and I think all athletes, have the have the same thought as you do. I haven't met an athlete yet that is out of loyalty to anybody. They just
Yeah.
want to be strongmen and women and just want to compete and have the best opportunity to do that. And we're getting there. I think we're getting there. So, how you feeling? Any injuries? Anything nagging on you?
Nothing huge. Just typical wear and tear after a big long prep. Because I didn't compete from national. I did like 3 competitions in like a month, which I try my best not to do anymore. Last how they fell, and then I didn't do anything until Clash. Just trying to get my body healthy, trying to get my body ready. And just the wear and tear that it takes, especially across events in like 4 hours, it felt like it'll just
10 events in 2 days, man. I mean, I tried to hit that home to people on my podcast the other day. Yeah, that's a lot of work to put out and to perform at the level you guys did on the second day. I think some of us had to sit back and wait a minute. These guys just did 5 yesterday.
I will day 2, I was struggling just like everybody else was. I remember I just got done with the dumbbell and I walked back to my bag, which was under the tent, and I took my stuff off. I changed my shoes. I grabbed my straps, and Casey Sharp came over. She was Tommy Sharp's wife, and she was like, "Hey, you need to go get in line for the deadlift." And I was like, "It's been 7 minutes." And she was like, "I know." Started the deadlift, and I was like, "Let's go deadlift."
Let's get it done. Yeah.
And it was a pace. Let me tell you.
Yeah, they really for a live production, man. I was super impressed. I mean, as far as the way you guys were able to move through without too much delay. I know there was occasionally that little delay in the middle of the pack when they go to commercial for a few minutes, but that was kind of a necessary break, honestly.
Well, I think that's the future the sport needs. If we're going to elevate, and if we're going to go to the next level, and as much as I love your parking lot competitions, obviously I came up in them, your grassroots shows, we need the big time stuff to grow everything else, and it'll trickle down.
Absolutely.
So I think that this is the future, because nobody wants to watch 10 hours of nationals. Nobody wants to watch 3 days and 12 hours at OSG. Nobody wants to watch that stuff because it's so long and just so many people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a part of the growth of the sport. I think we witnessed not only a great competition down there, but logistically we witnessed something on another level as well. I thought went really, really well. And to be able to do a show in a timely fashion that benefits not only the consumers that are watching it, but the athletes as well. We'll get used to it, right? I mean, listen, if you're used to those 4 or 5, 6 hour shows, you better get over that pretty quick, because I have a feeling things are going to start moving along here pretty well in the competition community as far as these contests go. So, well, listen, Tyler, I appreciate you coming on with me today, man. Short and sweet, and that's no knock on you, man. It's that I'm kidding, but that's a bad joke, but anyhow, I didn't mean to say it like that. But yeah, you are short and sweet, Tyler. I know you are. Everybody loves you. But in any case, I'm going to be following you pretty closely, man. Thanks for supporting Gym Life Podcast and coming on with me today. Anything you want to say?
Not much. Just happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, you should be, man. You're on top of the world right now, man. Everybody knows Tyler Young and what you put into this sport. So, and shout out to Grade 8 Performance. That's your facility down there in Tennessee. And real quick,
right over the Tennessee line, but pretty close.
Oh, where's it at?
Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Kentucky. Okay, that's right, Kentucky. I made reference to Anthony. I thought you were right next to him in Tennessee. But what about real quick for Grade 8 Performance? You do online training and stuff for a Strongman?
I do. So Nick O'Hare, obviously, that we mentioned earlier, is one of my clients. Richie, that won the 80 kilo OSG last year, he's one of mine. I coach Congdon, leading up to Clash at Waco. I'm starting to pick up, your higher profile clients, if you will. Got about 60 right now, so they keep me busy for sure. But, it's the imprint that I'm going to leave on the sport, once I'm unable to make my, flesh suit do what it needs to do. And
yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy coaching. Like it honestly stresses me out more than competing. You'll see me competing and I'll be out there like dancing with the music and like out, but coaching, I'm like, So,
well, yeah, I love that though, man. It's a great opportunity guys have now coming up through the sport. They're able to get into touch with guys like you and, guys like Terry Ratty and guys that have had a familiarity with the sport, understand what it takes to get to the top of the food chain. Can get these next athletes, this next generation ready to rock and roll. So yeah, I appreciate it. Hey man, once again, Tyler, thanks for joining me today. I'll stay in touch with you, man. Let us know what you got going on.
All right, brother. Have a good day, man.
All right, you too, man. Thanks.
Peace.